So our first panel today is the Colt 45s. Colt 45s panel is moderated by Greg Lucas. Greg has many, many years in broadcasting, most especially with the Texas Rangers organization and with the Houston Astros. He is also the author of a new book that is perfect for every SABR manager. It's called Baseball. It's more than just a game. So I'm going to turn this right over to Greg and let him introduce the Colt 45s who've joined us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is going to be a lot of fun, I think, for all of us, because on this panel we have three people that were there from the very first day, one that joined very closely after, and a final one that just got into the tail end of the Colt 45s and then had an outstanding career with the Astros. First, let me introduce who we have here on the panel. To my immediate right and left, this is Bob Aspromonte. Bob is noted for a couple of things particularly. One, that he was the last active member of the Brooklyn Dodgers to finish his baseball career. He was also famous for, though he wasn't really a home run hitter, he was very famous for his connection with a young fella from a neighboring state that had some eye problems, and Bob was able to come through for the guy on 3 occasions hitting home runs. We'll have him tell that story a little bit later. Next to him is a guy that you'll remember, especially if you're a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, because Hal Smith almost won the World Series for you in 1960. The program has it slightly wrong. It says that his home run in the 8th inning actually tied the game. No, it gave them a 2-run lead, 9-7. And then, of course, he was overshadowed because the Yankees came back and tied it. And then a guy named Mazeroski hit the real game winner in the 9th inning. But Hal Smith is with us as well. The guy in the middle is somebody you've all heard of, whether you're a baseball fan or not. Mickey Herskowitz has written books from biographies of baseball stars and athletes to Dan Rather to Hepburn to, Mickey Mantle. He's all over the place, but he was most noted originally as the first man on the beat for his newspaper when the Colt 45s were born. And there are several stories, I think, that are coming out to these gentlemen today regarding Mickey and how he handled the beat and some of the things he told people that made some people a little unhappy, so hopefully they won't all gang up on him tonight. Mickey Herskowitz. Next to him is Carl Warwick. Now, Carl is one of those classic the Texan stories, I wasn't born here, but I got here as quickly as I could. He was not an original Colt 45 because he actually joined the team a couple weeks into the season. But he was here for the first season and for several seasons after that before actually gaining national fame with the Cardinals in '64 when he set a pinch hitting record in the World Series, and he has a ring from being on that '64 Cardinals championship team. Carl Warwick. And a final member of our panel is a guy who's got one of the greatest nicknames of all time, the Toy Cannon, Jimmy Wynn. Jimmy was originally in the Reds organization, his hometown, and then he found his way to Houston and became one of the great home run hitters of all time. He also, of course, moved on to a couple of other teams and had some noted time with the Dodgers, where he had a big season and a pennant-winning year, and even finished up with the Yankees before his career was done. Jimmy Wynn, the Toy Cannon. Now, if people have questions during this presentation, we're using a card system, so if you want to pick up a card in the back of the room and hold it up, there'll be somebody collect them, and we will look at them as they come to us. But first of all, I want to start the discussion with a guy to my immediate right, Bob Aspromonte, because Bob, you and Mickey and Hal Smith were the three that were there at Apache Junction when this expansion team was put together. And this expansion team was unique because remember, when baseball expanded, they added teams in Los Angeles in the American League and Washington in the American League. New York in the National League and Houston in the National League. What's strange there? Well, there's really only one new city involved, and it was Houston. Everyone else either had a team in the other league or had a team in baseball before. So Houston was really a unique situation. You guys meet, you're selected, and you go down to spring training, and what were your first thoughts? I guess I'll open this to both of you guys that were here for the first time. What were your first thoughts when you joined this club?
Well, coming from the Dodgers, being as young as we were then, it was a great opportunity to play every day. New franchise, coming into a city. At that time, it was about 500,000 people. When you deserve so much credit, has to be given to Judge Roy Hoffines and Ari Bob Smith for creating the whole atmosphere of the Dome Stadium and winning that franchise. It was an incredible success story when you look at it. And then I had players like Hal Smith, who's 25 years older than I am. He helped me a lot.
Actually, Hal, you were one thing because you were one of those veterans they brought in. Bob had some time with the Dodgers, but you wouldn't have called him a veteran. You were a veteran.
School.
Yeah, you were a veteran. So you had to kind of lead the way, didn't you?
Yeah, it was different. I had played on losing teams, and I had played on a winning team. And then to get traded down to Houston, even though I really was glad about it at the time, because I was looking for some place to live in the winter time, because I lived in Michigan. It was so cold when I went home every winter, and then I decided I had to find another place to live. Well, we go to spring training, and I thought at first we might just be going rabbit hunting out there in that place at Apache Junction. As a matter of fact, Dick Farrell would walk from the hotel we stayed in, or motel we stayed in, to the training camp across this big field with a 6-shooter on his side, and he would shoot at rabbits or birds or anything that moved. And we'd hear him coming. So, well, Turk's almost here. Anyway, it turned out to be a fantastic year for me, even though it was so hot that it was tough on you to catch every day. I'll never forget the first doubleheader I caught was on July 4th. It was about 104 degrees. They carried 87 people out of the stands from Pete Prospect, and I lost, I think it was 13 or 14 pounds that day. And I thought, well, maybe this won't be too good for me down here. But, I caught Monday. Within 3 or 4 days, I had my weight back. So I said, well, this is great. And when they told me that it's like this in the wintertime too, except it doesn't get quite this hot, but you can fish and hunt, and I decided that's why I'm staying in Houston.
And I think it's a tribute. Sometimes when these panels are put together for SABR meetings, it's a little tougher to get former players because they don't live there anymore. Every one of these guys lives in the Houston area. Hal lives about 60 miles away, but that's close enough. But everybody else is right in this Houston area, and there's a lot of former players in all sports that actually do make it their home. Mickey Herskowitz, this was a young rookie guy. I mean, you'd been involved when the original people were trying to get a baseball franchise here. The George Kirkseys and the Cullinans and the Smiths and of course Judge Roy Hoffines. So you were really on the inside in the building of the franchise, but you had to learn a little bit about how to deal with players, didn't you?
It was all new to me, Greg, and
Right.
Hal and others of the veterans went out of their way to tell me what I should and shouldn't write, and what subjects to avoid, and what not to put in the paper that their wives would want to read. But going back to Apache Junction, it's hard to appreciate today what an incredible, eclectic, colorful blend of people and places that represented. Apache Junction was the strangest place any baseball team had ever held a spring training. Hal Smith will remember it well. And it was out there in the desert, 19 miles from Mesa, and that was the nearest anything. There was a Stuckey's convenience store filling station, a Red Garter saloon, which was where everybody did their serious training, and there was a supermarket, and that was it. You couldn't get into any trouble unless it came to you. And watching them change out the soft drink machine on Tuesday nights was one of the highlights, the vending machine. The players would all gather around to wait and get the fresh 7-Ups and Coca-Colas and whatever. But one thing I'd like to mention, of course, one of the great first building blocks was when Gabe Paul was hired as the original general manager before Paul Richards. Almost a little forgotten slice of Houston baseball history, but Gabe brought with him two of the great future figures in baseball, Hal Smith and Bill Giles. Hal went on to build this team and build this franchise and keep it together. Bill Giles went on to become the president and owner of the Philadelphia Phillies. But when people talk about great achievements in Houston sports history, our minds don't get really very cluttered with the long list. But the Rockets won a championship. The Oilers got to the championship game against the Steelers back in the Love You Blue days. The Astros got to the World Series. But I think the most remarkable achievement in sports in my time was the Houston Colt 45s winning the first 3 games they played over the Chicago Cubs, the oldest team in the National League playing against the youngest, and the Colt 45s swept that series. Little Bobby Shantz, who was one of the glory players of the old Philadelphia A's under Connie Mack, won the opener. Roman Mejias hit 2 home runs, and Hal Smith hit a home run. Then the next 2 games, Hal Woodeshick and Dean Stone pitched shutouts. And the Colt 45s, Paul Richards was the general manager opening day, and Harry Kraft was the manager, decided to start 3 left-handers against the Cubs. Stone and Woodeshick pitched shutouts, as I said. What was really fascinating was Hal Woodeshick had probably the most unusual distinction any baseball player had at that time. He was the winning pitcher in, I think, the 1954 All-Star game for the American League. He was the winning pitcher without facing a batter. He came on in relief with a couple of runners on base with the bases loaded, 2 out, went to the mound. Red Shandings tried to steal home. Dean Stone threw to home plate. They tagged him out for the 3rd out. And at the bottom of the inning, they pinch hit for Dean. They went ahead and took the lead, won the game, and Stone became the winning pitcher and never threw a pitch. And I don't know of any other time when that actually happened. The only other thing I was going to comment on was Hal Smith's recollection about the heat and humidity and the people passing out and getting heat strokes from the midday heat, the day games in Colt Stadium. The game that he was describing, literally 87 people were taken to the hospital for treatment, and Gene Elston said that it was hard to broadcast the game because you couldn't hear the sound on the radio because of the noise of the sirens going back and forth from the stadium.
You know, I got to add something to that because it's Hal's fate. He gets overshadowed somewhat in that 1960 World Series because of Mazeroski. You just did it too. His was the first home run ever hit by the Colt 45s or Houston Major League Baseball. So he needs to get. Roman is always overshadowing because he hit 2. So I guess we'll have to just give you credit for that.
Well, let me help finish up a little bit about his beginning as a writer.
Okay.
Can't wait.
We were in New York on a road trip. Now, this is a young ball club with young wives, young families at home, a young writer who wants to do something really different, be noticed, which he ended up doing. We get back home, and the wives that meet the players are all saying, okay, what have you all been doing? What have you been doing? You better not. We're all going, what? What are you talking about? Well, we read what Mickey Herskowitz said you did. Well, what's that? He said, well, in the afternoons, all you guys do is stand on the corner watching all the girls go by. Now, there was a song at that time which was exactly that. And he had heard it someplace, so with his creative mind that he has in writing, he standing on a corner, watching all the girls go by. Well, it made history in our house, I'll tell you that. And a lot of other ones too.
Let me point out, if you find this book on an old bookstore somewhere, it's called Letters from Lefty, and it's, I don't know, was this actually your first book you ever wrote?
Yeah.
First book you ever wrote, all those books. This is actually, I better watch this, maybe worth something. Anyway, it's a compilation of these columns that were originally in the paper, and they were the kind of stories that Hal's talking about. It's a fictitious player, but since the wives are reading it, they, well, where's he getting those ideas, I guess? That was the whole thing. Carl Warwick is with us. Carl, as I said earlier, had an outstanding career in baseball. He was one of the stalwart regular outfielders for this Colt 45 team, but you actually weren't with them in spring training. Tell us about how you got
Well, I was in spring training in Apache Junction.
You just didn't make it.
When was the first spring
Yeah.
training?
62.
Where?
Apache Junction.
Okay, so
And 63.
we were
You were
in
63.
63. we were
Okay,
there.
you just
Yeah.
weren't with the team.
I only have one story in Apache Junction. Is that Johnny Temple and I were invited to play a golf game with Paul Richards and Luman Harris. So we decided, okay, fine, we'll do that. And of course, with Paul Richards, you've got to set a bet before you get started. It's all got to be this way. So on the third hole, Richards hit a ball way out to the right in the desert. Now, there's no they don't have out of bounds out there. You just go wherever you can to find it. And so we looked and looked and looked and looked, and finally Johnny said, look, whose ball? Here's one right here. And he picked it up, and it's got Paul Richards on it. And I said, well, he said, no, don't say anything. We kept walking around directly. Paul said, here, I got it. So we played the hole, got through. About the second or third hole after that, Johnny reached in his pocket to get a ball to putt with, and he got the Paul Richards ball, and he putted it. And Richards was holding the flag, and he picked it up, and he picked up the ball, and he said, where'd you get this ball? Johnny said, I think I got it on the third hole over there. And things got real quiet. And we didn't say much for the next 4 or 5 holes, so Johnny said, I think we just played our last golf game with Paul Richards.
And Jimmy, when you were still, you didn't really join the big club immediately because you were in the minor leagues after being acquired from Cincinnati. What was your first impression when you joined this team?
Well, I just wanted to say that I was with the Colt 45s also in Apache Junction. Yeah.
That was after you'd been acquired from the Reds.
1963, yeah. I was with Carl and the rest of the guys here, but it was great. I think, I remember Apache Junction riding a horse, scared to death. And then somebody told me, Jimmy, let's go try to find the Lost Dutchman gold mine. I'm just scratching my head. I said, all right, let's go. Maybe I can get rich and, and not play baseball. Horse threw me. I walked all the way back to the hotel. That was it. I think the thing that I remember mostly about the Apache Junction was it just had a hotel, a restaurant, and the Giants were 50 miles away. Yeah. Wow. That was the closest team that we could go visit.
Yeah, that brings up a point. We read about Apache Junction. We don't hear about exhibition games. You did have to go quite a ways for exhibition games, right?
But they had a pretty good group out there. The Giants, the Cubs, the Angels were in Palm Springs, so those weren't short trips. But there were 5 or 6 really good ball clubs that they had to play over and over again. But I was hoping that when the Astros were considering a move to a new location now, they'd take another look out there at Arizona and the western part of the spring training, because it's really grown up and developed. And I haven't been to Apache Junction in quite a few years, but they had their 50th anniversary of the Colt 45s coming to town, and I read that the town had tripled in population to 15,000. And when we were out there, the population was 5,000. The cattle population was 15,000. And but what I do remember, this actually happened. Picked up the paper from whether it was the Weekly or a country paper or from Mesa. But while we were there, they actually brought a guy down from the mountains who had been looking for that Lost Dutchman gold mine. And he was carried down by some of the rangers that patrolled that area on the back of a burro with an arrow in his back. And of course he was dead. And they said that happened 2 or 3 times a year. Somebody would go up in those mountains looking for that mine, and they'd carry them out as a corpse. So I don't think any of the players actually went out looking for that gold. Farrell might have.
Farrell did, that's right.
Let me ask each of you, maybe some of your memories past spring training, once you got into the season playing with either the first team or your first team. Let's start with Carl. What was your biggest playing memory, either yourself or someone else, during that first year?
Oh, there were quite a bit. We kind of surprised a lot of people. And in that year, was it the Dodgers or the Giants? We knocked out the Dodgers, beat
Yep.
of the playoffs that year, which they didn't think could ever happen. And I think that was probably the best series that I remember from the whole 2 years that I was here. We just did something that couldn't be done. And I don't remember what did we win first year? 65 games?
65 games, and finished ahead of the Chicago Cubs and the New York Mets. So finished 8th in the 10-team league.
Well, and this team, right now Houston's going through a down period with 3 straight 100-loss seasons and maybe a 4th. They may do better than that this year. But the fact is, this team never lost 100 games. They were an expansion team. In fact, no team had until 4 years ago. And so this was an expansion team. And one thing you had is you had good pitching, good defense, not the greatest hitting, but you played good baseball, right, Bob?
But we also had some established superstars. We had Pete Reynolds, Eddie Casco, and Hal Smith to really work with the young players. That was a massive plus, especially when you're coming up from the minor leagues and you haven't played many years in the big leagues. To have that kind of a help along the way was really outstanding. And I think that helped a lot of the young players and the team, and we won a lot of games. When I look back, naturally, I was the first hitter. I got the first hit. A lot of first. And when you look back that far, you say, you talk about all these years and what a great, great feeling it was to be part of all that. But you got a lot of great memories as well. And a lot of stories that we're telling now, there was a lot of great baseball stories. Where we won games that we should not have won. How a young kid would come through in a clutch. And it made a lot of difference for all of us.
I'd like for all of you to chime in if you got something about the judge. Judge Roy Hoffines, that division. First of all, he didn't know really much of anything about baseball, and he studied up on it when Craig Cullinan and George got together, Kirksey, and they convinced them that baseball would be a good idea here in Houston, and he went all out once he studied. Talk about him a little bit.
Really interesting, because in speeches I make, I always bring up how we were fortunate enough to get Major League Baseball in this city. And Judge Roy Hoffines and R.A. Bob Smith and George Kirksey, how they put this together 3 years prior to the selection. And it all because of what they were doing is putting this massive Astrodome together. And to be able to be selected as a Major League franchise when you only have 500,000 people in the city, and not the coordination of minor league facilities as well. It was a great plus how they did it. And naturally after that, we became so well known because of the Dome, and we helped a lot of young kids in different clinics that we would perform, because this is more like a football area. And to bring that back in, and we did a lot of work. We were personally attached to the fans, and I thought that made a lot of difference.
I think, Bobby, what we have to remember too, we were the first Major League Baseball team in Houston, but you come here, you cannot believe the enthusiasm of the fans at the ballpark. Even when it was 110 degrees out there, they were still, and we were 5 runs behind, they were still pulling for us. I mean, the fans just took us in like we were something unusual. And you just made friends with them all over town, and it was a great experience because I had played in St. Louis, and that's an old baseball town, and there you don't win, they're not too friendly to you. But down here, they weren't quite broke in yet, so they were just glad to see somebody out there playing, and we just got great support from our fans, and I think that was one of the big things, and that really helped you play because, man, they were pulling for you from at the last inning when you're 6 runs behind, so that was always good to have them behind you.
Okay, Carl and Jimmy both this question, because there were stories of, we know the heat, the humidity, And the Colt Stadium was a temporary facility. It had no roof. It was the whole reason the judge put it was there was because the fans could see the construction of the Astrodome during the period it was being built. But it was so many legendary stories about the Mosquitoes in the outfield. You guys both played out there. How bad was it?
Well, my white socks were pretty red. Little red spots all over them. That's in the days we wore the little leggings and had to wear the sandies underneath. You just look down and you'd be covered with it. And it seemed like in those first 2 years it rained every day at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that grass would be wet. And by the time the game started, mosquitoes were everywhere. I just tried to, and you noticed everybody was running in and out of the dugout pretty quick just to get out of the mosquitoes.
Carl,
My recollection was that, it's the seventh inning, everybody knew that the crew come out and start spraying the field. I mean, not spraying the field, but cleaning the field up, the dirt, the infield. And I used to run out to center field, and all of a sudden I look up and there's come the big mosquitoes dive bombing. Straight down and picking up the fans, and they eyeballing a certain fan, pick them up and take them to the nest. And I said, finally I started talking, what in the world is going on here? This is a baseball game, not a dive bomber. Nobody bombing things, but that was my recollection of Old Colt Stadium.
Greg, the first day that we got back from the first spring training camp, we had never even seen the ballpark. And we get home from spring training, we go in the temporary clubhouses that they had, which were hotter than it was outside probably. Anyway, we're all excited, we're running out, we get onto the field, and all of us look down and we're solid black from here to here, from mosquitoes. And we went, whoa, everybody turned around and we're running into the other guys coming out and said, get out of here. Got back in, and the trainer got in his car and brought a case of spray so we could spray, and it ended up, they started selling it in the concession stands. Someone had to get them. It was unbelievable. But come to find out, that was an old rice field.
Yeah, it was a swampy area, so it was probably been the habitat of the mosquitoes for hundreds of
But the
years.
shock was we had no clue. We'd never even been on the field.
this was the only ballpark in America that sold anti-mosquito repellent spray at the concession stands, and it was the biggest seller they had. And when they'd had those summer thunderstorms that we're famous for here in Houston, Tal will remember 20 to 30 feet of water would fill up in the excavation where the Astrodome was being built. So that's where the mosquitoes came from. And actually, as rough as it was on these guys, imagine what it was like for those opposing teams that came in for 3 games at a time, 3 times a season. And the mosquitoes, they would bitch about that more than the heat. And it was like they needed a blood transfusion by the end of the game.
Well, is it not true that Ernie Banks altered his famous line when he came here? Can you remember what he said?
Yeah, I remember exactly what he said. Great day to play two.
Yeah,
Let's play two.
Not
Let's
here.
play two.
And they took him out in the second game. Put him in the dugout. He almost passed out in the heat.
Took him out on a stretcher, and the next day he came back, and I said, Ernie, you ready for two? So those were the great days of Old Colt Stadium.
Bob, let me ask you another question about the guys when they came in, the other teams, because that's the thing. When they showed up, I don't know if you had a home field advantage, but at least they certainly didn't.
What was interesting about it, when they come in from Los Angeles, Chicago, all the major cities, they would come to Houston and they would say, when you look around, there wasn't even a restaurant open after the game. They had to make major adjustments of what they were looking at. But they realized when we played on that little minor league field, what was happening right alongside it. But the city at the time, really, you couldn't compare it with the major cities. But they made the adjustments, and we were always part of that. We created a nice little relationship with our ex-players and some of the players in the different ball clubs.
So in other words, we're supposed to credit Colt 45s and the Astros for raising the population from 500,000 to 2.2 million?
I believe that.
Oh, okay, good.
Craig,
I believe
I'll tell you, I'm going to brag about one thing that I did. Bob Aspromonte is from New York City. Never had a gun in his hand in his life, never been hunting in his life, didn't know anything about it. When he came walking to the dugout or you come see him on the street, he looked like he just walked out of Saks Avenue with a brand new outfit on. Unbelievable. The ball season's over and he's staying, I'm staying for the winter. And I said, and I'd grown up hunting and fishing, and I said, Bob, want to go dove hunting with me tomorrow? Yeah, what's that? I said, dove hunting. He said, well, what do I got to do? I said, you just come to my house. I got a buddy who's got a big ranch, and he said we can hunt on it anytime we want to. He said, oh, good. What time should I be there? I said, we don't have to hurry.
4 o'clock in the morning.
I said, don't be here before like 6. And so, this is the truth. I walked to the front door, there's Aspromonte. Had a pair of alligator shoes on. Had to be worth $300-400.
No.
A pair of beautiful Calvin somebody's slacks, and a shirt with a big beautiful thing on it, and an alligator belt, standing there like this. And I said, we're going hunting. He said, okay. I said, look, Bob, come in. Brought him in the house, asked him the size of his shoes, and he happened to wear about the same thing I did. I got him a pair of boots to wear. He didn't know that there were snakes and things in the grass when you go in the country. I get him a pair of slacks to wear, a hunting jacket, and I gave him a gun. I said, does it matter which kind? No, that looks like a good one there. Okay, we get to the plate to go hunting. He and I start walking down, and up in a tree, I see some dove. And I said, Bob, to get started, see those dove up there? I said, well, shoot them. And wait a minute. I said, I'll make a noise and they'll fly and you take a shot at them. I said, okay. Doves flew off. I'm waiting. Boom, boom. I screwed 2 or 3 times. And I said, you haven't pulled the trigger. He said, I didn't know when you meant to shoot. Well, this went on a while, and I said, Bob, you ought to stick to something else because I don't believe you make a living
But if
being
you,
a hunter.
to summarize the story, it was probably the worst experience of my life. Especially with Hal teaching me what to do.
I know Bobby, I know why you had a problem there. You thought Hal said, let's go love hunting.
I'm now going to ask the question. I'm going to ask the question about your heroics now. This is a little embarrassing, probably, because it comes out really good, and he has to tell the story. But it's the story with Bob and Billy Bradley. There were a few years ago, the Fox network was doing a little series of vignettes, and they'd actually reproduced that story. And it's a story about a young fella who was temporarily blinded, who loved baseball and loved Bob Aspromonte. And I'm going to let you tell the story, Bob.
It really is the most incredible story to be part of. It's a real divine intervention story. Little Bill Bradley, 9 years old, playing Little League Baseball in El Dorado, Arkansas. And there was a massive storm that came in, and they got everybody off the field. But little Billy went underneath this tree in a water fountain and was struck by lightning and blinded. And they come to Houston to go see Dr. Louis Gerard, who at that time was the key specialist. And he called the ball club and said, Bobby, would you go sign some autographs for Billy? And I said, sure, where is he? So I went to the hospital, and I brought him a bat and a ball and a hat. And this kid is all bandaged up incredibly, and a big smile on his face. And the doc says, here's Bobby coming in, and so on. And we talked for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I was leaving. He says, Bobby, would you hit me a home run? I said, Billy, I'm not a home run hitter, but I'll give you my best effort. Last of the 9th inning, we're down by 1 run. Boom, I hit a 3-run homer to win the game. And this kid is just going crazy with the family. He gets operated on 1 week later, 1 eye at a time. And he comes back 6 weeks after that, and I took the family to lunch, and we were talking about, you know, how well you're doing, Billy, just stay strong. And then naturally, when I'm leaving, he says, Bobby, would you hit me a home run? I said, Billy, you're really pushing your luck. Would you take a couple of base hits? No, you can hit me a home run. Last of the 10th inning, scores tied 2-2, bases loaded. I hit a grand slam home run for him. So as I'm coming around the bases, and we got the ball back, and we gave it to Billy. And Gene Nelson was announcing all the time, and he made this go across the country as a story. This one's for you, Billy. This one's for you. So Billy, after that, he's home, and we're communicating all the time. Comes back the next year after the second operation was done, and he's seeing a lot better. Take the family to lunch, and he says, Bobby, would you hit me a home run I can see? I said, Billy, you know what? Something's going on. This is not Bob Aspromonte. He's getting a tremendous amount of help. I'm going to hit you that home run. Last of the first inning, bases loaded, I hit another grand slam home run. And the story continues on. He's doing so well. 2 years later, and like I said, every time, this one's for you, Billy. 2 years later, I get an article from El Dorado, Arkansas, and naturally telephone calls and everything. This one's for you, Bobby. He pitched a 7-inning no-hit game 2 years after all of this stuff. And our relationship has just been incredible. We were just honored at the Houston Eye Associates here in February, and we had all the reminiscing of going back that far with all the people in the audience from the Houston Eye Associates and all the guests. And I said, that story, and that kid is right there. I got him to walk up. Billy, 58 years old. And he came to the microphone. Everybody, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. It's just an incredible story, and most definitely my best highlight. I just got a lot of help doing that, though.
I want to plug yet another book. It's not on sale here. If you find this book anywhere, again, go back to those used bookstores. I'm a champion of used bookstores. This is the Colt 45s, a six-gun salute. It was written several years ago. That story is in it. A lot more stories about just the Colt 45 years. Robert Reed is the author of this book, and it was done, as I said, several years ago. And it's really a great book. I know you probably all have it too. Actually, it's really the follow-up to this book that you all got, to the book about the history of baseball before the Colt 45s. And then I'm going to do my sales pitch here, because in the section back there, the vendors section, they have the book that actually covers from the Colt 45s to the present times. There's 3 books, and you basically have the whole history of this franchise. Mickey, you covered the team for how many years?
Since the start. Of course, I'm not covering them today, but started in 1959, actually, when the effort first began to bring a major league team here, and on through to, I guess, the World Series year 2005, and after that, I took an endowed journalism chair at Sam Houston State, but I covered the team, I guess, for the first 40 years.
You learned, obviously, a lot about how to cover a team and how a team changes over the years. This group of guys was very close, though, weren't they, the Colt 45s?
I suspect that's the case, but I don't think you ever will have anything close to the era that these guys came from, because the game wasn't saturated yet by mega $1 million negotiations, contracts, or mega million stadiums. And even the temporary stadium, Colt Stadium, was a very distinctive place for that time. It was the first ballpark in Major League Baseball to have colored seats. Everywhere else in baseball, all you saw when you walked into the stadium was green seats, green walls. And at Colt Stadium, every section had a different color, and the colors were like pastels, turquoise, and odd things like that, which came out of the very fertile mind of Judge Roy Hoffines. And almost everything that started with the Astros started with Judge Hoffines. The ushers were nice-looking young girls called triggerettes. And when he hired a fashion designer to design their costumes, their uniforms, and the first time he got the product, Judge Hoffine sent it back because he wasn't happy with the buttons. So they had to redo the buttons on the triggerette uniforms.
That brings up another question I'm going to try to get in regarding the stuff you guys had to wear on the road at the beginning, but we'll get into that. We have a couple
cowboy
questions
uniforms,
from the, I'll let you complain about that in a moment, but a couple questions from the people in the audience. On their stats, you hit, Hal Smith, you hit 391 against Camilo Pascal, who was a very good right-hander. Your right-handed batter, though, you hit 4 homers against Johnny Padres, but only 226. Sadecki was another left-hander. You killed him. You hit 467. Why did you have an easier time with Ray Sadecki than probably anybody you faced?
I don't know. maybe I just felt like he wasn't going to hit me in the head.
Well, that's...
I'd already had my brain
He's
rattled
already-
a few times behind the plate.
I also have a question for Jimmy. This has to do with your record against Claude Osteen. Now, Claude was a lefty. You're a right-handed hitter, so you're supposed to hit left-handers, but 211. How come? Hey, these people know these numbers.
211, yeah. That's a pretty good year, Jimmy.
Yeah, yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Do you want
Yeah,
the questioner
who
to
sent
stand
that
up?
question up here? Raise your hand, please. Yeah, I got something for you.
You better worry about it. The guy that digs that deep really is into this game.
Boy, I tell you, he is. He's
Okay,
one
well-
hell of a baseball fan, I tell you that.
To give you credit, he does note that you were above average against both Bob Gibson and Juan Marichal. So there, okay.
What do you mean above average?
Well-
About 212.
You don't have anything.
212
on
is
Wiggins,
above
then
average
you're
with Bob
good.
Gibson. That is the worst pitcher I've ever faced in my life.
Hey, Jimmy, I got my first big league hit off of Bob Gibson. And 15 years later, I was waiting for my second one.
You know, Bob Gibson used to tell me every time he sees me when we play golf tournaments. He look at me up and down and said, "You're too small to be hitting the ball out of the dome. You got a cork bat." I said, "Yeah, when I'm facing you."
A question you probably had, and I don't know if you can answer it because you're probably still asking it. Why did they put the foul lines at 360 at Colt Stadium? That's a pretty big ballpark. Why'd they do that?
Wind blew out to left field.
Is that it? That's it? So that helped cut it down. Thank you very much. Now, I wanted to get back to that question about the. When the judge put this team together, he decided we're gonna every stereotype about Texas is gonna be with this team. You know, from the Colt 45 name to shooting guns when they broke the ground for the Astrodome, to the clothes that he made you wear on the road, at least for a while. Carl, okay, either one of you
First
guys.
of
What do you
all,
say
I was
about
a
this?
player rep.
Okay, and then
of the team.
He was forced on you.
Oh, he just said, have
That was our first mistake.
Harry Kraft said, have a meeting before the game tomorrow because we want to talk about the new uniforms we're going to get. And I said, what new uniforms? He said, the cowboy uniforms. I went, the cowboy uniforms? Yeah, he said, well, they're going to be nice. They're going to be fitted. We're going to have a guy do it and everything. I said, okay, I'll ask the guys. The guys came in, and guys like Dick Farrell and Carl Warwick and Hal Woodishek and a whole bunch of them, when they asked them if they'd be willing to wear cowboy uniforms on the road. And they all said, no, we will not do it. So Harry Kraft walked out. In about 15 minutes, Harry Kraft called me and said, come in the office. I went in the office and he said, the judge wants you to call a meeting for all your players. Tomorrow before the game, he wants to discuss something. And if the guys up here know, but if you've ever been around a judge, he could sell you anything he wanted to. It doesn't make any difference. He had a perfect gift of gab. Well, he held a meeting, and he started telling what we would do. We'd be on the road. We'd only wear the uniforms as we traveled. When we got to our hotels, we could take them off. He said, now, take a vote, Hal. I said, yeah, everyone in there, yeah. Okay, we go on a road trip. And the first road trip we go on is playing the Dodgers out in California. And here comes all the guys. And come to find out, when we went down to get fitted, we also got shirts, cowboy ties, just beautiful blue, light blue, like something you'd dream about, like this color blue on that book. You know,
Hats.
who would ever pick a color? Anyway, and the boot, and cowboy boots, the same color. And a lot of them didn't fit. Okay, we go on the first trip. We land in California, and all the guys are complaining about their feet are hurting, and I'm not wearing this hat again, and oh, we had the hats too, blue. We get in, and we're going through the airport, and standing where they rent Avis insurance and all that stuff for all these girls. Work behind the counters, and we're walking through, and this girl said, "Who are you guys?" And I forget who it was, Dick Farrell or Astro or somebody said, "Oh, we're the Dick Bannicky, what's that? Bennicky. The Bennicky Band." There was a band at that time.
Bennicky.
Actually, what happened now, if you let me
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
amend that a little bit. First of all, these weren't Roy Rogers and Gene Autry costumes. They were fitted, tailored Western suits. Really nice, classy, expensive, powder blue, and as Hal said, all accessorized, a blue shirt, blue tie, blue boots, and a blue cowboy hat. As I remember it, we were actually in St. Louis, and Hal Smith, Bobby Tiefenauer, Woody Schick, and Aspromonte were like in a group. Different guys were wandering off, going to the bar, the newsstand, or whatever. But
Not us, though.
the three or four guys were standing together, and two women walked by, and they said to them, "Are you the sons of the pioneers?" And without missing a beat, and actually these guys had a pretty good barbershop quartet, they all just broke out into this melody, and they did the theme song from the Sons of the Pioneers.
Actually, Hal, you did play the guitar, right? You and
Yeah.
a couple other guys played the
They
guitar.
had a little musical talent, so that was one of the highlights of the season, was the episode of the cowboy suit.
But Carl, that didn't last. You didn't have to go all year wearing
No,
that.
about
No.
2/3 of the season.
I came down two weeks after the season started, and Bill Giles came to me, and he had a piece of paper, and he said, "You need to go down to this place tomorrow and get your cowboy suit." I said, "No, what?" He said, "Your cowboy suit." I said, "Okay, what's that for?" He said, "Well, you're going to wear that when you go on the road." So my wife and I went down, right downtown in Houston, someplace. You talk about being fitted. I mean, they measured here, everywhere. They were measuring you, checking your feet, sitting, putting it in powder and checking it out. And I'm going to tell you what, they were custom made. In fact, I still have mine.
There you go.
I wish I had mine.
You wear it every weekend, right?
I'm wearing
No, but I can get in them now. They're a little bit tighter. Let me tell you a funny story, though, about it. We go into Los Angeles. We go in on a night after a game, I think, in St. Louis, and we got a day off the next day. It's like a Sunday night. We go in, next day's off. We come to the locker room on Monday to start the game, and there's a cowboy suit hanging in one of the lockers. Harry Kraft walked in, he said, walked by that, and he looked back, stopped and looked back. "Whose cowboy suit is this?" Nobody said anything. And here Merritt Renew came in, young catcher who walked in like that. "Merritt, is this your uniform?" "Yes, sir." He'd already dressed, already had his baseball uniform, been out on the field. So Harry said, "I need to have a meeting with you." So they went in, they came back out, and I said, "What did he say, Merritt?" "Well, it cost me $200. He said, I guarantee you that's the first time I'll leave the airport and go somewhere else without changing suits."
I got a couple of other questions from the fans here. Bob Aspromonte grew up in Brooklyn. Did you play at the Brooklyn Parade Grounds League and quality of baseball in that league if you did?
My Lafayette High School in Brooklyn, New York, produced 16 major leaguers. It's an incredible story. Our superstar was Sandy Koufax and Joe Torre. We had an incredible group of athletes that we played baseball all those years, from the young kids. When I graduated high school, 4 days later, I signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers. 17 years old, I joined the Brooklyn Dodgers. And never forget it, when Walter Olson was the manager, he says, Bobby, go field some ground balls with Pee Wee Reese, Jackie Robinson, and Gil Hodges. That's how you field ground balls before the game. I couldn't even find where shortstop was. I was so nervous. Went around and started fielding ground balls with them. And I had an oversized glove. It was more like an outfielder's glove. I didn't know the difference. And Jackie comes up to me and says, Bobby, that's an outfielder's glove. Here, you try my glove. And I tried his glove with shorter fingers. We played for a while. I said, oh, Jackie, thank you for a lot. No, he says, Bobby, you keep that glove. I kept that glove for 45 years, and it's somewhere special right now. It's an incredible way to start. That was the first day of my baseball career, is to be surrounded by those individuals.
Oh, that's tremendous. Jimmy Wynn, a couple of questions for you. One, I bet you've answered this one before. How someone who was considered small was able to generate so much power?
Thanks to Hal Smith. That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
He gave you the coaching?
No, it was a lot of hard work, my father. My father was my coach, my teacher, my protege. He's the one that taught me how to hit. And he told me a long time ago that if you want to hit home runs, if you want to drive a Cadillac, you got to hit home runs. If you want to hit singles and be, something like that, drive Chevrolets. So now you know which one I wanted to go to, the Cadillac. So my father taught me how to hit the game of baseball.
The other question, it may have happened actually technically out of this era when you were with the Astros, but it's the home run you hit in Cincinnati that almost wound up on your front porch of where you grew up. Tell about that one.
Oh, yeah, that was, I think everybody really loves that home run. I think Cincinnati, Old Crosley Field. Anybody know about Old Crosley Field? Raise your hand. All right, great. Put them down now. They had a scoreboard in left center field. I don't know how tall it was, how big it was. I think 56, 60 feet or something high like that. Then they had a clock on top of it. And I hit a home run off that. I forget the pitcher, but it landed on the freeway. And then the ball was bouncing, and if you heard Lowell Pass say the ball is still bouncing. Now the first bounce, if you look at the first bounce, straight up there where the first bounce came was where my mother and father lived, along with me. So it was an honor to see that ball bounce and remember the good old days of where I was born.
Bob mentioned the influence on some of the great names from baseball's past that he had when he joined the Dodgers. Jimmy, by growing up in a big league city like Cincinnati, you had some influences too, didn't you? Some members of the Reds.
Oh, I did. Hal Smith for number one. Wasn't for Hal guiding me and talking to me and doing the things the things that I really wanted to do was become a Major League Baseball player. So Hal Smith helped me out a great deal. My athletic director was a Bird Scout for Cincinnati, and upon graduation in 1960, I had a tryout with Cincinnati, with the big club down in Crosby Field. I did everything right, hitting the ball out of the ballpark, playing shortstop at the time, filling the ball, throwing it over, and all of a sudden the president, I think, of one of the owners or general manager called me to the side and talked to me a little bit. Jerry Lynch told the general manager then, said, listen, don't let this kid get out of Cincinnati. He is going to be one good ball player. Don't let him leave. And the scout who wanted to sign me went to the house, to my parents' house up in right by Crosby Field. And that was my time. I'm dreaming of becoming a Major League ball player, and that was it. And talked to my mother and father. My mother looked at him and says, "If you want my son now, would you wait for 2 years?" Scout said, "Yes." And all of a sudden, you know, as a kid, you know, driving a Mustang Cadillac, I saw it just floating right out of the house. There it goes, it's gone. But make a short story, it's very important that you understand your mother and your father. My mother was right, my father was right. 2 years in college, and then after the 2 years, my mother called me and says, "The Scout is here, so come on home." So I signed with Cincinnati, and with the help of Hal Smith, who's in the audience now, I'm not saying that because he's here, but I'm saying because my trust was put in him, and we've been good friends for years and years and years. So I signed my contract, went to Tampa, Florida, did a very good job down there, and Houston drafted me in the winter of 1962.
Very good. Actually, let me ask Hal to stand, because he obviously was part of this group. He's not in this group because he's got some other groups that he's being with, but Hal Smith, who, of course, for many years in baseball. Yeah, Carl, you got something?
Yeah, I owe a whole lot to Jimmy Wynn. I tell you, when he first came up his first year as a rookie, Al Spangler and I played center, and Spangler played left. And during batting practice, we'd see him hitting the ball real good and hitting it pretty good. And we'd say, that's enough, get out. We didn't want him staying there too long. So after about 6 weeks, Spangler said, "You know what? This kid's going to be a heck of a baseball player, and he's going to take one of our places." And I said, "I think you're right." And Spangler said, "He's probably going to take yours because he's too good to play left field." So anyway, as the things turned out, he's responsible for me probably going to St. Louis and being in the World Series in '64. They traded me that year. So thank you, Jimmy.
Let me not get away without you making some reference of '64, because that was a great year for you. I went to St. Louis, win the World Series, got to play with guys like Gibson and your little pinch hitting. Tell us about it.
Well, it was quite an experience, kind of like a kid's dream come true, and a lot of fun. And I ended up pinch hitting, being Johnny Keene's #1 pinch hitter, which caused some little bit of problems because Bob Skinner was a left-handed pinch hitter who had a lot more years in the big leagues than me. But I've hit against the right-handers and the left-handers all in good times with men on base and so on, and had a real good season for the last half of the season, just pinch hitting, and really got lucky, had 3 straight consecutive pinch hits in the World Series, which didn't set a record, but it tied a record. There's only been like 5 guys that's gotten 3 pinch hits, which you got to go way back in. Now, some of these guys would find that in the stats, but they're hard to find. But anyway, that was quite an experience.
Hey guys, we've just about run out the string. I want to really appreciate Jimmy Wynn, Carl Warwick, Mickey Herskowitz, Hal Smith, and Bob Aspromonte. It was an outstanding panel, guys. Thanks a lot for coming.